He never yelled. He never begged. He just looked at her and said, "I guess I wasn't enough." 7 years later, she hired a detective to find the husband she betrayed. What he told her shattered her soul. Tonight, on the Confession Stories, I hired a detective to find the man I destroyed. This is Evelyn's confession.
The rain had been falling since late afternoon, soft at first, like fingertips on a piano, and then harder, relentless, like it had remembered what it was meant to do: wash the city clean. I sat alone at my kitchen window in Portland, watching headlights smear into watercolor on the glass. The apartment carried that familiar, expensive silence. All floor-to-ceiling windows and cold stone surfaces that look good in listings, but don't hold a voice. On the table, a shoebox. On the shoebox, my wrists. Inside the shoebox, ghosts. I should have thrown it away years ago. I didn't. I told myself it was proof that I could still remember. Proof that I hadn't turned into the sort of person who forgets what she breaks. I lifted the lid. The scent of old paper rose like a small private storm. There we were, in 100 versions of almost the same truth. James with his ridiculous summer scarf and that stupid soft smile. Me with my hair wind-tangled and not yet afraid of myself. A photo from the river walk. Our first apartment key on a ribbon. A photo from the courthouse steps. The day I passed the bar. His hands on my face like I was the only thing worth congratulating. And then the one I kept in my wallet, tucked behind my credit card like a talisman I didn't deserve. Our wedding day. I ran a fingertip over his tie. I still remembered the texture. Linen slightly stubborn like he was when he insisted he could learn to cook if we just stopped ordering Thai. He cried when I walked down the aisle. It startled me then. How clean tears can be when they're made of gratitude and not grief. I looked up from the photographs and into the wet night. A bus hissed somewhere, stopped, went on. Somewhere, an elevator chimed. My building is full of people achieving things. It echoes with success the way a cathedral echoes with prayer. Therapy told me my kind of ambition was a survival technique. Therapy told me I ran toward achievement when I was afraid of intimacy and ran toward danger when intimacy ran toward me. Therapy is very good at telling you why you set the house on fire. It does not give you back the rooms. 7 years. That's how long I've been living in a museum where everything is labeled before the door opened early, before the suitcase thumped once against the floorboards, before I said Marcus's name when I should have said nothing at all. Marcus. I hate the shape of that name now, how it drags as it leaves the mouth. He was clever at the firm and careless with promises. He laughed the way arrogance laughs, like it hasn't yet been introduced to consequence. I can make a case for why I did what I did. I can file it in triplicate and get it stamped by whatever committee governs human weakness. But that won't unmake the verdict. James came home early. A canceled flight, a happy accident for everyone but us. People think devastation is loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that rearranges your inside walls. He stood at the doorway, overnight bag still in his hand, and looked at me like we were strangers who had almost recognized each other. He didn't throw a lamp. He didn't spit a name. He didn't say, "How could you?" He said 5 words that have never stopped speaking. "I guess I wasn't enough." There are sentences that hang in the air long after the air has moved on. That one still lives in mine. He left that night. No slammed doors, no second drafts. Just the sound of rain beginning like the world had been waiting for a cue. We were divorced before the hydrangeas could fall apart in the city planters. 3 months. That's all it took to unspool 5 years of vows. Then he did the thing I hadn't considered. He disappeared with intention. New number, no socials, no mutual friends, no forwarding address, not even a cruelty. Disappeared is the wrong word. It makes it sound like he was careless. He was careful, finally, about the one thing that could still hurt him. Me. I like to say the guilt killed me quickly. It didn't. Shame seems to believe in slow work. I became partner at 35. I learned to speak in ways that made rooms sit up. I signed a lease for a view people photograph. I bought cut flowers because somebody told me living things forgive you if you water them. At night, I'd unzip the side pocket of my purse and touch the wedding photo like a superstition. Sometimes I'd whisper, he was enough. Sometimes I'd whisper, I was not. Marcus lasted a year, said I had too much of a past. Like a person can be a light suitcase and still carry a home. The worst part is that I started measuring time by how long it had been since I'd hurt someone who wasn't there to stop me anymore. 7 years is a long yardstick to carry. I had told myself I would never try to find him, that it was an act of mercy not to. But mercy can be an alias for fear, and fear had been writing my return address labels for too long. 3 weeks ago, a small, unsurprising thing happened. My finger hovered over a phone number for 20 minutes. The number belonged to a private investigator with a name that sounded like a hinge, Mason Harding. I made tea I didn't drink. I rearranged the photographs into a chronology that felt like a defense. I spoke aloud to the empty room because empty rooms don't interrupt. You owe him, I told myself. You owe him the truth that's 10 minutes late and 7 years heavy. I pressed call. Riverside Investigations, a gravelly voice said, the syllables wearing a coat of coffee and rain. This is Mason. My throat tightened. I need to find someone. Name, James Hart. Pause, paper moving, a pen clicked. Relation? My ex-husband. Another pause. I imagined him leaning back, looking at a ceiling water stain shaped like a map of a country that never existed. Purpose? To apologize, I said. Not to get him back. When he spoke again, the voice was softer in a way that made me want to sit up straighter. Tomorrow, 9, bring anything you have, full name, old addresses, socials if you kept them, photos. I'll be there. Ms. Hart, I almost said. Then I corrected the ghost. Evelyn Hart, I said, but I use my maiden name now, Evelyn Parker. See you at 9, Ms. Parker. Click. Afterwards, the apartment felt wary, like it knew something was about to change. I stacked the photos back into the box with careful, guilty hands. I left the wedding photo on the table. It felt rude to bury it again. Outside, Portland kept raining, the way only a place that understands grief can rain, without spectacle, but with stamina. I stood at the window. 3 floors down, someone ran with a jacket over their head. The kind of small, frantic choreography only weather can teach. James, I said, just the name, just to see if my mouth still knew the shape. I thought of the last breakfast we ate in peace. The coffee he made too strong, the toast he burned because he was rehearsing a compliment to get it right, the apartment that didn't yet echo. People like to say affairs start with a decision. Mine started with a dozen that looked like nothing. Staying 1 more hour, 1 more joke, 1 more drink in a room where we were too young to admit we were old enough to know better. If you ask me for advice, and you shouldn't, I'll tell you that destruction is seldom spectacular at the beginning. It is incremental. It walks a quiet dog at midnight while your marriage sleeps. I turned off the kitchen light and let the city glow be the only lamp. The apartment softened. Shadows learned my name again. I took the wedding photo in both hands and did the thing I never let myself do. I pressed it to my chest like I could reverse osmosis the past. "I am sorry," I whispered. The words were not a performance this time. They were a weight, and it felt right that they were heavy. In bed, I didn't sleep. I measured the night in streetlights and freight trains and the way rain sometimes rests before it decides to begin again. At 3 a.m, I got up and packed a folder for the detective. Marriage certificate, copy of the divorce decree, James's old employee records, a list of addresses that used to know us. I included 2 letters I had written and never sent, one angry, one penitent. They looked wrong next to each other, like a before and after set where the after is ashamed of the before. I also printed out a map of the city with all the places that could still remember us circled in red. The bookstore where the owner used to tuck aside advance copies for him. The Vietnamese place on 12th where the server called us by our noodle order. The dog park we went to, even though we never owned a dog because we liked their uncomplicated joy. By 5, the rain thinned to a mist, like someone had turned down the volume and left the station on. By 6, I showered. By 7, I pinned my hair the way I do for court. By 8, I realized I had put on the perfume he once called the smell of home, and I washed it off. At 8:30, I stood in the doorway with my coat, my folder, and the tired dignity of a person who has elected to stand under a truth she built with her own hands. Before I left, I returned to the table, to the photograph, to the ghost. I spoke to the version of me in the white dress and to the man who cried when he saw her. "I don't expect forgiveness," I said. "I expect to tell the truth." Then, because the morning had finally learned to be quiet, I added, "I owe you this." I stepped into the hallway and locked my door. The sound was small and decisive. It is astonishing how many chapters begin with the sound of a key doing what it's supposed to do. The elevator opened, I stepped in, pressed L, watched myself in the mirrored walls, a woman I was still learning to be. Outside, the sky was the color of unpolished steel. Portland held its breath. I held mine. And then I walked into the rain. Mason's office was exactly where a detective's office should be, above a pawn shop, next to a bar that pretended not to be open before noon. The stairwell smelled like old rain and older cigarettes. Every step up felt like a cross-examination I'd scheduled for myself. His frosted glass door said Riverside Investigations in fading black letters, the kind that don't need to prove they've been around. I stood there with my hand on the knob for a full 10 seconds, long enough to consider turning around, long enough to realize I'd already paid in more than time. I knocked. "Come in." Mason Harding looked exactly like he'd sounded. Late 50s, maybe early 60s, steel gray hair, a tie that had given up by lunchtime. Eyes the color of photocopies, faded but still catching everything. He gestured at the chair across from his desk. "Ms. Parker." "Mr. Harding?" The chair creaked when I sat. So did a part of me. His desk was covered in manila folders and coffee rings. In another life, he could have been one of our clients at the firm, the kind you underestimate until they hand you the one piece of paper that ruins your argument. "Let's start with what you brought," he said. I set the folder down like a confession, marriage certificate, divorce decree, old HR records, a list of addresses, photos, too many photos. He opened it, flipped through without commentary. I tried to read his face. He'd left that part of himself at home. "James Alexander Hart," he read. 42 now by my math. You were married 5 years? 5 years and a handful of days, I said, depending on where you think a marriage ends. One of his eyebrows moved a millimeter. It felt like a lecture. And you're looking for him because... He let the question hang like a test. Not what do you want? Because. He wanted cause, not sentiment. I destroyed him, I said. The word surprised us both. 7 years ago, he came home early and found me with someone else. He walked out, filed through lawyers. He's been gone ever since. Mason's pen tapped the desk once. Not judgment, just punctuation. And now I need to apologize. I swallowed. Not to win him back, not to break anything he's built. I exhaled. I need him to know that he was enough, and I was the one who wasn't. He leaned back, chair protesting. Studied me in that long, uncomfortable way people with experience use instead of adjectives. Ms. Parker, he said finally, 30 years in this line of work has taught me something. Just one, I tried to joke. It landed like a stone. He didn't smile. People who disappear this thoroughly, he tapped the folder, usually have a good reason. The question is whether your reason for finding them is better. He let that sit between us. It felt heavier than the file. Let me be clear, he continued. Are you hoping to rekindle anything? No. The answer came fast. Too fast. I corrected it. No, at least not in any realistic way. I know that chapter is over. I can't move forward with this version of myself without owning what I did to him. He watched me another moment, then nodded once. Okay. My rate is $100 an hour plus expenses. Finding someone who doesn't want to be found can take weeks, sometimes months. Money isn't the issue, I said. Not anymore. He slid a standard retainer agreement across the desk. $5,000 to start. Sign at the bottom. I'd signed dozens of documents that changed people's lives. Divorces. Settlements. Contracts. This was the first time I felt like I was signing a mirror. My hand shook just enough to make the pen stutter on the P of Parker. When I pushed the papers back, his features softened half a shade. Not kindness exactly, maybe recognition. One more thing, he said. Before I take this on, I need you to be honest with yourself. That's historically not my specialty, I said. This part needs it to be. He steepled his fingers. Are you doing this for him? Or are you doing it so you can sleep? The room went smaller. The rain on the window got louder. For both, I said finally. Is that the wrong answer? There aren't wrong answers, he said. Just honest ones. I'll let you know what I find, but I'm going to say this now so I don't forget later. Forgiveness is not something you can hire me to fetch. I know, I whispered. But information is, and I've been hiding from it for 7 years. He nodded once. Then we're done for today. Keep your phone on. Some people don't leave many breadcrumbs. Your ex-husband? Feels like the careful type. Careful, I thought, except when he chose me. Yet the weeks after that turned into a kind of silent trial. I was prosecutor, defendant, and only witness. Mason didn't call, not at first. He sent one email asking for clarification on an address, another to confirm a middle initial. Minimal words, no unnecessary comfort. Every time his name appeared in my inbox, my heart lurched like a badly parked car on a hill. I buried myself in work. More depositions. More late nights at the firm where the lights never all turn off. Are you trying to move into your office? Melissa asked one night, leaning in my doorway with takeout in her hands. She'd been my friend since the early associate days, back when James would fall asleep at the kitchen table waiting for me to come home. Just staying ahead, I said. My go-to lie, it tasted stale. She stepped inside, set the food down on a stack of case files. Eve, you've already lapped the rest of us twice. What's really going on? I stared at the window. Rain again. Portland has good timing that way. I hired a private investigator, I said finally, to find James. She exhaled in a way that said she'd been expecting something like this, just not the noun. Wow, she said. Okay, and why now? Because 7 years is starting to feel like cowardice, I said. Because I can explain my childhood to my therapist and still wake up choking on that one sentence, he said in the doorway. Because every time I think about dating someone seriously, I see James and I can't make my feet move. She was quiet for a moment. Are you hoping he takes you back? No. The answer burned this time. If he's built a life without me, I don't want to tear it open. I just need him to know I understand what I did, that I know he was enough, that if there's any corner of him that still feels defective because of me, I want to take that weight back. And if he doesn't want to hear it, she asked gently, then at least I will have tried, I said, and I can spend the rest of my life knowing the door stayed closed from his side, not because I was too afraid to knock. She reached across the desk, squeezed my hand. I hope you get what you need from this, she said. I just don't know if what you need and what you want are the same thing. Neither did I. 3 weeks and 4 days after I signed Mason's retainer, my phone rang while I was reviewing a settlement offer. His name on the screen sliced the day into before and after. I closed my office door, sat down, forgot how to breathe like it was a learned skill I'd let expire. Miss Parker, he said when I answered. His voice sounded the same. The world did not. I've got something for you. There are sentences that could mean anything, and still your body knows exactly what they're about. Is James okay? I asked. The word alive sat unspoken between my teeth. He's alive, Mason said. More than that, by the look of it. Something in my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. Where is he? Town called Harborview, Mason said. About a 3-hour drive up the coast. Small place, harbor, boardwalk, the kind of town that still has a hardware store that sells everything. Of course, I thought. James had always wanted that. A place with a pier and a diner and a Friday night routine that wasn't dictated by billable hours. What is he doing? I asked. He's a high school counselor, Mason said. At Harborview High. I closed my eyes. James, who used to stay up late talking about how no one ever taught him what to do with emotions that didn't fit inside the word fine. James, who said, if I weren't in logistics, I'd want to work with kids like me. Is he happy? I whispered. It felt like an indecent question. Mason hesitated. Paper rustled on his end of the line. From what I can tell, he said slowly, yes, he's well regarded. Students like him. I talked to one of his colleagues off the record. She said he's particularly good with kids from messy homes, divorces, betrayals, that sort of thing. Of course he is, I thought. Of course he took the one thing that broke him and built a bridge out of it for someone else. There's something else, Mason said. The silence after that sentence felt like a held door. Say it, I managed. He's remarried, Mason said. The word landed like a gavel, not surprising, not unjust, just final. Her name is Leah, he continued. Leah Morgan, nurse at the local clinic, late 30s. No kids yet, but they've got a dog. Golden retriever. Neighbors say they walk him every evening after dinner. I pressed my hand over my mouth. There was no sound to catch, just the feeling of something inside me sitting down very slowly. He got married 4 years ago, Mason added, so 3 years after the divorce. 3 years, a reasonable time, a kind time, enough time to go to therapy, learn to breathe again, sign papers for a new life. In some cruel pocket of me, I think I had imagined him alone. Not forever, just long enough to match my punishment. "Ms. Parker, you still there?" "Yes," I said. The word cracked. "I'm here." He cleared his throat. "I'll send you the full report. Addresses, photos, details. Before you decide what to do with it, I want to ask you the same question I asked in my office." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Are you doing this for him?" Mason said quietly. "Or for you?" This time, I didn't answer. I didn't have a mouth big enough for the truth. "I'll email everything tonight," he said. "Whatever you choose, remember, his life is not a crime scene to revisit. It's a home he built after the fire." When the call ended, my office was too bright, too quiet, too small. I sat there, staring at the phone like it might offer a different ending if I waited long enough. Remarried. The word looped soft and merciless, like rain on a roof that isn't yours anymore. Mason's report landed in my inbox at 11:47 p.m. I stared at the notification for a full minute, as if the email might vanish if I showed too much interest. It didn't. Of course it didn't. Consequences are punctual when you least want them to be. I clicked. His summary was clinical. Addresses, dates, employment history, property records. At the bottom, an attachment of photographs. I opened the photos first. Of course I did. There he was on my screen, older in the way time is supposed to make you older. Not ruined, just settled. His hair was a little shorter, with gray brushing his temples like someone had painted in wisdom where shock used to live. In one picture, he was coming out of what had to be Harbor View High, backpack slung over one shoulder, talking to a teenager whose whole body language screamed, "I don't talk to adults," except he clearly talked to James. In another, he was on a small front porch, 2 steps up from a tidy lawn. There was a blue door, a white railing, and a hanging fern that looked like it had never missed a watering. Beside him, Leah. She was shorter than I'd imagined, with dark hair pulled into a loose bun and a softness in her posture that made her look like she'd say sorry, even when she wasn't at fault. In one photo, she was laughing at something off frame, head thrown back, hand on his arm, not clinging, just resting there like it had always belonged. In another, they were walking a golden retriever down a tree-lined street side by side, their hands brushing and then linking without looking. Not electricity, not chaos, just an easy kind of gravity. They looked, and I hated how true this was, right. I zoomed in on his face, searching for damage I could recognize and call mine. It wasn't there. He didn't look like a man still living in the doorway where he said, "I guess I wasn't enough." He looked like a man who'd walked past that doorway and kept going. I closed the laptop so fast the screen blinked in protest. For a while, I just sat there on the couch, hands on my knees, heart beating like I'd run somewhere, except I hadn't moved at all. Then I stood. Then I packed. Not much. Jeans, 2 shirts, a sweater, the folder I'd made for Mason with its neatly tabbed evidence of a life I'd fractured. I left the shoebox on the table this time. It felt redundant. At 3 a.m, I was on the road. Portland shrank in the rearview mirror, all glass and angles and achievements. The highway opened ahead like a question I'd been avoiding. Rain followed me in intervals, like it was on its own schedule, and I was just politely inside it. I drank gas station coffee that tasted like burnt apologies and rehearsed a dozen versions of what I might say. "I'm sorry. You were enough. You deserved better." None of them felt like enough currency for what I owed. Sunrise turned the clouds pale pink over the ocean as I got closer to Harbor View. It was almost offensive. How beautiful the world could be while I was driving straight into a wreck of my own design. Harborview was exactly the kind of town James used to describe when traffic was bad and we needed somewhere to send our minds. A main street with a bakery that probably opened before dawn, a hardware store with bells on the door, a coffee shop with mismatched chairs, and a barista who knew your name by the second week. I drove past the high school, red brick football field, a sign out front that read, "You matter more than your grades." I wondered if that was his idea. It sounded like him. Then I turned onto Maple Lane, hands suddenly damp on the steering wheel. Number 14 was easy to spot. Pale blue siding, white trim, a small porch with 2 chairs and a little table between them. A welcome mat that said, "Come as you are, dogs especially." I parked half a block down, close enough to see, far enough to pretend I was just there. I told myself I'd only look, confirm with my own eyes that he was okay, that he was loved, that whatever damage I'd done had not been the final word. There is a word for what I was doing. We call it closure, so it sounds noble. Sometimes it's just trespassing with better grammar. At 3:30, a silver hatchback turned onto the street and pulled into his driveway. Leia got out first, wearing scrubs, hair flattened under a simple headband, eyes tired in the way people's eyes are when they spend their days looking at other people's pain. Then he stepped out of the passenger side with a paper grocery bag in his arms. My lungs forgot their job. He closed the car door with his hip, said something that made her laugh, and they walked toward the house, bodies leaning in just slightly, like even gravity knew they went together now. From where I sat, I could only see shapes and gestures. But sometimes that's enough. Joy has a silhouette, so does safety. They disappeared inside. I stayed in the car, an hour, maybe more. Time turned into something mushy and unreliable. Lights flicked on in different rooms. Once, Leah appeared in the kitchen window, holding a cutting board. She put on music I couldn't hear. Her shoulders moved like the kind of dancing you only do when you feel at home. I told myself, this is enough. You've seen what you came to see. He's alive. He's loved. You don't get to ask for more. My hand even reached for the ignition. That was when the front door opened again. James stepped out with the golden retriever at his heels and a worn leash in his hand. The dog bounded down the steps, tail whipping the air. Complete disregard for the gravity of anyone's past. They turned in my direction. I could have ducked. I should have. Instead, I froze. He walked closer, eyes on the dog, on the sidewalk, on the small ordinary things that make up a life. Then, as if pulled by some old muscle memory, he looked up. Our eyes met across 20 feet and 7 years. The world went soundless. No cars, no birds, no dog, just the echo of every version of us that had existed before the worst one. I opened the car door because it would have been more insane not to. My legs shook when they hit the pavement. "James," I said. His name tasted the same. He stopped completely. The dog sat obediently at his feet, tongue lolling, utterly uninterested in human tragedy. "Evelyn," he said. Hearing him say my name again was like having a scar speak. "What are you doing here?" There was no anger in his voice, just shock, wary and layered. Every speech I'd practiced died in my throat. "I needed to see you." His jaw tightened. He glanced back toward the house. Through the front window, Leah moved past with a dish towel on her shoulder. "How did you find me?" he asked. "I hired a PI, I said. The words sounded pathetic even to me. "Riverside Investigations. Mason Harding." He exhaled through his nose, a humorless almost laugh. "Of course you did. You always were thorough when you wanted something. I just need 5 minutes, I blurted. 5 minutes to say what I should have said 7 years ago, and I swear I will leave you alone for the rest of your life. He looked at me for a long time, measured me, measured the risk. Then he jerked his head toward the end of the street. There's a park around the corner. Not here. I don't want Leah to see you and have to lie before dinner. Shame flushed hot under my skin. We walked in silence, the dog trotting between us, leash swinging like a metronome, ticking out the seconds left of whatever this was. Harborview Park was small. A couple of benches, a swing set, a view of the water framed by leaning pines. He tied the dog's leash to a bench rail. The dog lay down with a contented sigh, already bored. Then James turned to me fully. Up close, I could see the years on his face, lines at the corners of his eyes from laughing, or squinting into the sun, or both. There was a time I would have known the answer. Talk, he said quietly. I had prepared paragraphs, pages, threads of explanation woven from therapy and self-awareness and hindsight. What came out was small and crude, and the only honest thing that could fit through my mouth. I'm sorry. He blinked once. Okay. No, I said quickly. Not like that. Not the kind of sorry people toss around when they spill coffee or show up late. I am sorry in a way that has bones, in a way that sits on my chest at night. I am sorry I betrayed you. I am sorry I turned our home into a crime scene. I am sorry I took the one person who loved me without asterisks and made you feel defective. My voice shook. I didn't try to fix it. You were enough, James. You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't. I was the one who blew up the house because I was afraid of the warmth. He looked away toward the water. His hands were in his pockets. He had always put his hands in his pockets when he was trying not to explode. You regret it, he said finally. Not a question. Yes, I whispered. Every day for 7 years, every shower, every sleepless night, every time I see someone with coffee and burnt toast and think, that should have been us getting old and ordinary. He nodded slowly, still not looking at me. Good. The word sliced. You should regret it, he continued. You should carry that with you. Do you have any idea what that first year was like for me? I know it must have been. No, he said sharply. Now he looked at me. For the first time since Portland, I saw the man in the doorway, just for a second. You don't know, he said. I don't think you can. I couldn't sleep without seeing you in that bed with him. I'd wake up choking. I lost 20 pounds I didn't have to lose. I went to therapy 3 times a week just to be able to get through a day without screaming. Don't say you're sorry again, he cut in. It doesn't put the weight back on. It doesn't give me back the nights. It doesn't unteach my body that the person it trusted most could become the threat. Tears blurred my vision. The park doubled. So did my guilt. I quit my job because everyone there knew, he went on, or thought they did. I couldn't walk past the conference room where we'd had the Christmas party without remembering you standing with him under the exit sign, laughing at something I wasn't invited into. I moved here because I couldn't stand being the man people looked at with that blend of pity and gossip. He laughed once, bitter and small. Do you know what it's like to have your marriage summed up in office whispers? To become that guy, the one whose wife slept with a coworker? You turned my whole life into a cautionary tale, Evelyn. I swallowed hard. I know, I said. Not like you, but I know I did that. I know I broke you. And now you're here, he said, in my town, outside my house. Asking for 5 minutes like that makes it small. I'm here because I can't stand the idea that some part of you still believes you weren't enough, I said, and because I've spent 7 years punishing myself in circles, and none of it mattered if you never even knew I understood. He studied me, eyes moving like he was reading footnotes on a document he hadn't requested. Be honest, he said quietly. Are you here for me, or did you come to get something? I opened my mouth to say for you. It stuck. I exhaled. I want you to know the truth. And yes, I think part of me wanted to hear you say you forgive me, even if you didn't mean it, even if you just said it, so I'd go away. I wanted a verdict. There it is, he said. No triumph, just confirmation. He took a step closer, not close enough to touch, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his irises I'd almost forgotten. I'm not going to give you that, he said. The sentence landed with the clean finality of a judge's gavel. You don't get to use me as the exit door from your guilt, he continued. I did the work. I sat in those awful chairs and told strangers about you until I thought I'd dissolve. I clawed my way back to something that looks like a person, and then I built a life with someone who never made me question my worth. His voice softened when he said, someone. Leah loves me, he said simply. She trusts me, and I trust her. I'm not going to drag that life into the shadow of what you did just so you can sleep better. I would never ask you to give that up, I said quickly. I'm glad you have her. I'm glad you're happy. You deserve exactly what you have. Then let me keep it, he said. Let me keep it untouched by you. The words should have felt cruel. Instead, they felt clean. We both stood there, breathing in opposite directions. Do you hate me? I asked. The question slipped out, small and childish. He considered it, actually considered it. No, he said finally. Not anymore. Hating you was too heavy. I put it down, but that doesn't mean I want you in my life. It just means you're not the main character in my pain story anymore. A strange relief passed through me, sharp and aching. I had been demoted from center of his universe to someone he used to know. I appreciate you coming here, he said. I do. It takes a certain kind of courage to stand in front of the person you broke and say you broke them. But it doesn't change anything, Evelyn. I'm not the man in that doorway anymore. You're not my wife anymore. We're just two people in a park where kids are going to come in 20 minutes and need the swings. I nodded, tears sliding down my face unchecked. So, what do you want me to do? I asked. He glanced back toward Maple Lane, at the sliver of blue house visible through the trees. Go home, he said. Live your life. Do something with the guilt that doesn't involve me. Help someone, change, whatever. But don't come back here. Don't write. Don't call. Let this be the last time we stand in the same air. I flinched, but I didn't argue. You don't argue with a boundary that clean. I promise, I said. My coming here was selfish. I see that now. I won't step into your life again. He nodded once, untied the dog. Evelyn, I looked up. For what it's worth, he said, I do hope you find some kind of peace. Not because you deserve it, but because living like I did that first year, no one should stay there forever. Thank you, I whispered. I don't deserve that either. He shrugged. Maybe not, but not everything is about what we deserve. Then he turned, started walking back toward Maple Lane, toward the blue house, toward the woman waiting inside with a dish towel on her shoulder and a life built on trust. The dog trotted beside him, happy, unburdened, already forgetting I existed. He didn't look back. I stayed on the bench until the sky began to bruise with evening. Children arrived with their parents, filling the swings with laughter that didn't care about my tragedy. Eventually, I stood, walked back to my car, drove past his house one last time. The porch light was on now. It looked like all the other warm houses on the street. I whispered, "I'm glad," to no one, to everyone. Then I turned the corner, left Harborview in my rearview mirror, and drove back toward the city I had chosen over him once. This time, the road felt different. Not like an escape, more like a sentence I had just agreed to serve. The drive back to Portland felt longer. Same highway, same gas stations, same stretches of trees and dark water. But the road had changed shape inside me. It wasn't an escape route anymore. It was the path back to the life I'd built out of the wreckage, and now had to decide what to do with. Twice I had to pull over. Once at a rest area, once on the shoulder with my hazards blinking, because the sobs came so hard I couldn't see the lines on the asphalt. At some point, my tears stopped being about James and started being about the version of me who'd thought she could have everything and lose nothing. By the time I parked in the garage under my building, my body felt hollowed out. Not empty, just scraped clean. Upstairs, the apartment greeted me with its usual curated silence. The shoebox still sat on the table, lid closed, like it had been expecting a verdict too. I didn't touch it, not yet. Instead, I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over Mason's contact. Then I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Harding. "It's Evelyn," I said. My voice sounded like I'd borrowed it from someone thinner. "I went to Harborview." A pause, not surprised, just waiting. "And?" he asked. "I saw the house," I said. "Him, his wife, the dog." I laughed once, a broken little sound. "I talked to him." Another pause. Paper somewhere in his orbit shuffled its weight. "How'd that go?" he asked, like he was asking how a meeting went, like we both knew there was only one category of answer. "He told me he's moved on," I said. "That he doesn't hate me, but he doesn't want me in his life. That I don't get to use him as an exit for my guilt." "Well," Mason said softly, "I'd say he's not wrong." "I know," I whispered. "That's the worst part. He was right about everything." We sat in that shared quiet, a detective and the woman who'd hired him to find the man she'd broken. I searched for the right word. Exposed. Like I went to the scene of the crime and found out I was the only one still living there. Mason exhaled. "Here's the thing about guilt, Ms. Parker," he said. "People treat it like a sentence. Sometimes it's a hiding place." "I don't understand," I said. "If you're busy punishing yourself, you don't have to change," he said. "You don't have to risk becoming someone else, because you're too busy replaying who you were. Your ex-husband? He turned what you did into something useful. He helps kids climb out of holes like the one he was in. Maybe it's time you stopped decorating your hole and started climbing too." A laugh sob escaped me. "That's harsh." "It's also true," he said. "Being sorry doesn't earn you anything. But what you do with the sorry, that's the part that counts." "What do people usually do?" I asked. "Some drown in it," he said. "Some weaponize it. A few, if they're stubborn enough, use it as fertilizer." Fertilizer. I repeated the word like it was in a language I hadn't studied. "Yeah," he said. "Rotten stuff that helps something else grow. You can't change Harborview. You can't change that blue house or the woman in it or the man walking that dog. All you've got left is Portland and the person you decide to be when you wake up tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word looked possible for the first time in a long time. Painful, but possible. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, he replied. Go do something with it. Then maybe. When the call ended, the apartment wasn't different. I was. Just a fraction. A hairline crack in the way I'd been carrying my guilt. I got up, walked to the table, opened the shoebox. One by one, I took the photos out, not to wallow, to decide. Some I kept. The river walk key, the courthouse steps, a Sunday morning where we both looked like we believed in future tense. Some I slid back into the box and closed the lid, not erasing them, just filing them under then. The wedding photo I put on the fridge with a magnet, not as a shrine, as a reminder. You were loved like this once. Remember what you did with it. Choose differently next time. 6 months after Harborview, I changed therapists, not because the old one was bad, because I needed someone who wouldn't let me treat insight like a souvenir. Dr. Nguyen was blunt in a way that made my chest ache and my brain grateful. You understand why you cheated, she said in our second session. Good. Understanding is step 1. What are you going to do with that understanding? I'm going to stop hiding behind it, I said. The words surprised me, but they were true. We worked not just on the night of the affair, but on all the small choices that paved the road to it. The way I avoided conflict, the way I used work as both shield and weapon, the way I didn't let myself believe I deserved stable kindness, so I chased chaos to prove myself right. In parallel, I changed my workload. I started taking on more family law cases, messy divorces, custody disputes, situations where love and damage had grown wild together. I offered to handle a few pro bono. My partners raised their eyebrows. But my numbers were good enough. They let me have the indulgence. On Tuesday nights, I volunteered at a community center across town, helping women fill out forms to separate their lives from men who'd broken them. The first time I sat with a woman whose husband had cheated on her, I felt my throat close. She twisted her wedding ring, eyes shiny and stubborn. He says he's sorry, she whispered. He cries. He goes to therapy. I don't know if I'm cruel for not being able to forgive him. I wanted to say, you're not cruel. You're wounded. It's not the same. Instead, I said, forgiveness is a gift, not a wage. You don't owe it to anyone on their timeline. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She signed the papers. When she left, she squeezed my hand. Thank you, she said. You get it. I went home that night and cried in the shower. Not from guilt this time, from the strange relief of finally being useful to someone whose pain looked like a reflection of my own, but with the angles reversed. Continuing 1 year after Harborview, I wrote James a letter. Not to send. That was clear from the start. I wrote it because there were things I needed to say to the version of him he used to be, and to the version of me who stood beside him. I wrote about the women at the community center, about the pro bono cases, about the nights I still woke up with his sentence echoing in my head, and the mornings I chose to get up anyway. I wrote, I am trying to honor what we had, not by pretending I didn't destroy it, but by refusing to waste the lessons. I am trying to become someone who would have deserved you, even if I never get the chance to be that person beside you. At the end, I wrote, thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to be loved. Thank you for walking away when I deserved to be left. Both of those things saved me, just on different timelines. Then I folded the letter, took it to the kitchen sink, and burned it in a ceramic bowl. The paper curled and blackened, words turning to smoke and ash. It didn't feel like letting go, not exactly, more like marking it where I was on the map. A little X that said, "You are here, not back there." Then 3 years after Harborview, I ran into Leah. Of all the places for the universe to stage that scene, it chose a coffee shop downtown, half a mile from the courthouse where I'd once become an attorney and once become divorced. I was waiting for my order, scrolling through emails, when I heard a voice say my name. Evelyn? I looked up. It took a second for recognition to line everything up. The dark hair, the softness, the familiarity I'd only seen in photographs. "Leah," I said. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had a fleeting, ridiculous urge to run. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm here for a nursing conference. I saw you, and James showed me a picture once." "Of me?" I asked, startled. "Of both of you," she said. "From your wedding. He keeps it in a box in the closet." I didn't know what to do with that information, so I filed it under complicated blessings. "Can I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair at my table. "Yes," I said, because saying no felt cowardly in a way I was tired of being. She sat, hands wrapped around her cup like it might contain something steadier than caffeine. "James told me you came to Harborview 3 years ago," she said, "that you talked in the park." "I shouldn't have," I said automatically. "It was selfish." She tilted her head. "I actually wanted to thank you." The word hit me sideways. "Thank me?" "After he saw you," she said, something shifted. The nightmares stopped. He stopped tensing every time he heard your name. He stopped carrying this invisible weight I could never quite name. You gave him closure he couldn't give himself. Tears stung my eyes. "He gave me the opposite," I said. "He cut the last thread I'd been using to tie myself to him." "Sometimes that's the same act," she said gently. She hesitated, then smiled. "We're expecting, 4 months. The breath left my lungs in a small, involuntary sound. "A baby," I said. "James is going to be incredible." "He's terrified," she said with a fond roll of her eyes. "But yes, he will be." There was a short silence. Not awkward, just full. "I've been following your work," Leah said suddenly. "My work?" She took out her phone and pulled up a local news article. There I was on the screen, standing in the community center, a headline about free legal aid for women leaving abusive marriages. "After Harborview, I Googled you," she said. "I wanted to know who you were now. We check your center's updates sometimes. It's beautiful what you're doing." I stared at the photo, at myself, smiling at a woman whose hand I was holding. I looked different. Not younger, not softer, just more aligned somehow with who I was trying to be. "I'm trying," I said, "to be better, to honor what I lost, what I took." "I think you're doing that," Leah said. "Just keep doing it, not for James, not for me, for you." She stood, shouldering her bag. "Take care of him," I blurted. "Please." She smiled. "Every day," she said. "I promise." Then she was gone, leaving the faint smell of hospital soap and second chances. "5 years after Harborview, I stood at the front of a small room in the community center, facing a half circle of women. A whiteboard behind me said, "Tuesday group rebuilding after betrayal." "My name is Evelyn," I said, "and 5 years ago I drove to a small coastal town to ask the man I'd broken if he would forgive me." A murmur moved through the room. Recognition, curiosity, caution. I had cheated on him, I went on. He had left. I had spent 7 years carrying my guilt like a medal and a punishment. I thought if he said the words, "I forgive you," I would finally be allowed to be a different person. I told them, carefully, about Harborview, about the blue house, about the woman on the porch and the dog on the leash, and the man who would not offer me a shortcut. He didn't forgive me that day, I said, not out loud. What he did was worse and better. He told me to go live my life, to do something with what I'd done that didn't involve reopening his wounds. A young woman in the second row, Maria, 28, mid-divorce, raised her hand. How do you know, she asked, when you're allowed to forgive yourself? When you've done enough? I smiled. A little sadly. I don't think it's about enough. I said, if you wait until you've earned it, you'll die waiting. Self-forgiveness isn't a prize, it's a practice. You wake up, you remember what you've done, and you choose to spend the day being someone who would never do it again. And then you do that again the next day, and the next. She frowned. So, it's never over. It changes shape, I said. At first, it's a wound, then a scar. Eventually, it's a story you tell in rooms like this so someone else doesn't feel so alone. When the session ended, women lingered to talk, to cry, to make appointments, to ask where to start. I stayed until the last one left. Turned off the lights, locked the door. On my way home, my phone buzzed. An email notification from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, Harborview. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Evelyn, Leah told me she ran into you a while back. She also showed me the article about your work at the center. I've been thinking about that day in the park. I was angry. I was also honest. I don't take back what I said, but I've had 5 more years to think. My vision blurred. I kept reading. You were right that you didn't deserve forgiveness. And I was right that it wasn't my job to give you an exit from your guilt. But I've learned something working with my students. Forgiveness isn't about what someone deserves. It's about letting go of the anger that keeps you stuck. I'm writing to tell you this. I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because I don't want that night to be the anchor on the rest of my life. From what Leah tells me, you've spent the last few years trying to make something good out of something ugly. That matters. I hope you've learned or are learning to forgive yourself. If not, consider this your permission to at least try. You were the worst thing that happened to me. You were also, in a strange way, the catalyst for the life I have now. I wouldn't go back and choose the pain, but I also wouldn't trade where I am. Leah and I are okay. Our daughter is 4 now. She loves dogs, the ocean, and asking why 16 times in a row. I'm happy, truly. Take care, Evelyn. Be kind to the version of you who is trying. From what I can see, she's someone worth forgiving. James. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Then I walked to my window, looking out over the same city that had once felt like proof I'd chosen wrong. Portland glowed, cars moved. A couple on the sidewalk huddled under one umbrella, arguing about dinner in the way people do when they assume there will be hundreds more dinners to come. I saw my reflection in the glass. Older, tired, softer around the edges in ways I had earned. I forgive you too, I said to her. To me. This time I meant it, not as a get-out-of-jail-free card, as a quiet agreement. We will do better from here. Later that night, I opened my journal, started a new page. I wrote, once I set fire to the life of a good man. I lost him. He rebuilt. So did I. Not together, but still. I used to think redemption meant getting back what I'd broken. Now I think it means refusing to waste the pain. I loved him. I hurt him. I lost him. I survived. And now I help other people survive themselves. That's not a happy ending. It's not really an ending at all. It's just a life. Mine. And for now, that's enough. I closed the journal, turned off the lights. Outside, somewhere far from my window, rain began again. Not as punishment, not as absolution, just as weather.
Sometimes, when we hear stories like Evelyn's, it's tempting to look for a neat bow at the end, a grand apology, a teary reunion, two people walking back into the same house like the fire never happened. But real life doesn't work like that. Tonight, you listen to a woman who set fire to her marriage with her own hands, and then had to learn that forgiveness doesn't come with keys to the old front door. James built a new life, a blue house, a golden dog, a woman who never made him question his worth. He didn't owe Evelyn a single word. He owed himself peace. And Evelyn, for 7 long years, confused guilt with growth. She carried her shame like a punishment, but didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't the detective. It wasn't the drive to Harborview. It wasn't even James's final email. It was the choices she made after that day in the park, helping other women, changing the way she loved, refusing to let her worst moment be her whole story. That turned her "I'm sorry" into something that actually meant anything. Forgiveness is not a time machine. It doesn't rewind wedding vows or erase nights you wish you could unlive. Sometimes it sounds like, "I forgive you, but stay out of my life." Sometimes it never comes at all. And sometimes, like with James, it shows up quietly, years later, not to reopen a door, but to finally close a chapter. The harder truth: the person whose forgiveness you need most might be the one staring back at you in the mirror. So let me ask you, if you were James, could you forgive someone like Evelyn? And if you were Evelyn, how long would you punish yourself before you let yourself try to become better? Would you have driven to Harborview? Would you have walked into that park? Or would you have stayed in the city and let guilt turn into a cage? Wherever you're listening from tonight, your car, your kitchen, a small rented room that feels too quiet, I hope you remember this. You cannot control whether someone forgives you. You can only control what you build with the pieces of who you are now. If someone has hurt you, you're allowed to walk away and stay away. Forgiveness is not a free pass. It's just a way of putting down a weight you're tired of carrying. And if you are the one who did the hurting, maybe tonight is the night you stop replaying the crime and start deciding what kind of person you're willing to be from this point forward. This is the Confession Stories. Real hearts, real mistakes, real people trying to find their way out of what they've done and what's been done to them. If this story stirred something in you, tell us in the comments. Would you forgive Evelyn? Have you ever needed forgiveness you didn't deserve? Share your thoughts. Share your story. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Confession Stories, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next confession. One more thing. Take a breath. Whatever role you've played in someone's story, you're still allowed to write the next chapter of your own. Good night. Sleep gently. And may you find the courage to be kinder to the person you're becoming.